guys, and welcome back to another video. So for this video, which I'm calling another Tone Quest video, where basically we look at achieving certain tones and a bit kind of that kind of thing, exploring ways of changing your tone. Today we're going to look at basically what I think is the biggest, most important pedal to completely change your tone, and that's an EQ pedal. Now, the thing about EQ pedals, especially powerful active EQs, is they can really mold your tone, and it doesn't change the feel, it doesn't change a lot of things. Well, it kind of can change the feel, but it really can sculpt your tone that your amp can't, and most distortion pedals and such can't really change your tone. And this is because active EQs aren't very common in most guitar gear outside of EQ pedals. Now, you maybe have a EQ on your amp, and you got bass, mids and treble, and you think, well, why would I buy a pedal when I can do it on my amp? There's multiple reasons. One, most amps have passive EQ, which means all they do is cut. So fully up is like there's no EQ, and all they can do is cut frequencies. They're not that powerful, they're set to certain frequencies in that amp. If you've got an old Marshall, for example, it can really only change the tone a little bit by completely adjusting those EQs. Now, some amps do. Mesa have their 5-band graphic in some of their amps. A lot of amps have back sandal, treble and bass, which is an active style, but most of your amps don't. And the other reason is distortion pedals. Now, a lot of modern manufacturers are making distortion pedals with 3-band EQs, either passive or active, and are really cool. Like the new Wampler Plexi Drive Deluxe and Pinnacle Deluxe both allow you to do it. The new Super Crunch Box is the same, super versatile. But a lot of pedals don't, they're just a tone control, which is usually just a high pass filter. And some pedals, like the Mark IV we have here, don't even have a tone control, which means, look, the tone is good, but if you want to adjust it to fit in the mix, if you know you want a change to the sound, your guitar doesn't suit your amp, using someone else's amp with a different kind of set EQ, then it doesn't fit. So this is where we bring in EQ pedals. So when I opened there, I was using an EQ pedal before distortion and after distortion. And these are two different kind of things, because basically the way a distortion works is it takes the frequencies and clips them, but it doesn't clip them evenly. And this is why a tube screamer might sound very different to another modded tube screamer, because you can change the frequency at what it clips, you can change how it clips. So some pedals, like a tube screamer for example, filter off a lot of the low end so they don't clip as much. Now if you push that low end up, then you're going to get a different clip. The general rule is the more bass you have before you get to the distortion, the more fuzzy and kind of fat and buzzy it gets. The less bass is tighter and kind of cleaner sounding in a way. So putting an EQ before, like I have this GT EQ, can kind of sculpt that distortion. It also allows you to kind of change what your pickups sound like. This is a Telecaster single coil. I like using this as a bass because it's kind of easier to get thicker to me than it is to get more lively, which you get from single coils. But it doesn't sound like a humbucker. Now, an EQ isn't going to replace a humbucker, but it is going to be able to get you slightly different tones than you would at your normal single coils. And here is after distortion. And after distortion, if your amp is clean, really gives you that kind of control of, is it a buzzy, is it bright, is it chuggy, is it mid-scooped, is it mid-pushed. We're going to start with the orange. This 2-stroke is a parametric EQ. This is a graphic EQ. They can both EQ, they just go about it very, very differently. The biggest difference is parametric EQ, you change the frequency. So you get to pick the frequency and then you boost and cut that frequency. On a graphic EQ, the frequencies are set, but you have multiple frequencies. So parametric can be more versatile in some ways, but a graphic can be more versatile in other ways because you generally have more bands to choose from. You can do more things. But there is some parametric pedals, and once you go into pro audio world, you can get parametric EQs like the stuff in your door. You might be able to have 10 bands of parametric EQ with Q controls and a lot of things, and you get really, really complicated EQing there. But we're looking at guitar pedals, and we're looking kind of at the simple end of things. So in that opening thing, like I said, I use the GTEQ to fatten up to act like humbuckers, and I use the orange to change the amp structure and change the pedal distortion sound to be a bit more old school Marshall. So if I just go to 12 o'clock here, what we're going to do, all the distortion off, I'm going to turn the pedal off, and I'm going to kind of sculpt my amp tone. So we're going to stay on the bridge, so this is the clean tone, straight into the seritone. Now, I like my seritone a lot, but it does have this kind of, it's got a bit of mids, doesn't have a lot of bottom end, doesn't have the cleanest high end. And if I want to go for more of a Fender kind of funky thing, it doesn't really do it as much. So what we're going to do is first use the two-stroke to do that. So the first thing I want to do is use the low control to find out the mids that I want to take out. So this low control here, its frequencies go from 120 to 1.2. Now mids are generally around 700 to about 2K. So there's overlap on the mids frequencies, but it does depend. So what we could do is use the low control to have a look at that frequency and then add some real high end. And then we're going to try sort of the opposite, use the high control to find mid frequencies, add some low end. It's basically two different things you can do with what this is, which is 2-band. Now if you have a 3-band EQ, which is very common, then of course you've got 3 different bands, so you could use a separate control to figure out the mids and highs and lows. So straight up, I'm just going to boost a frequency so I can find it. So let's just play some bits. So you hear that's more the bass range. Low mids. So around there, I think is what I want to cut. So let's just cut that. Almost an acoustic-like quality. We've lost a little bit of volume, but we can use this oil control, which is basically volume, to boost that back up. So now I want to go find some really highs. Control. So about here. So that is kind of your Fendery highs, and we're just going to boost the volume a bit up here. So this is your two sounds. So this was kind of wanting to go for a scooped mid, funky kind of thing. Might take a bit more mids out. So this is our starting sound. Maybe a little bit too many highs. Let's pull out even more. Let's change to the middle pickup for a kind of a bit of a different thing. So we've gone from more of a Marshall-y clean, a bit warmer, a bit kind of voxy as well, to this super scooped, almost Fender-y thing. Now, it doesn't sound exactly like a Fender, it doesn't overdrive like a Fender. I'm not saying the EQ pedal can completely change your amp, but it's a sound that my amp can't do by itself. So what we're going to do is on this low frequency now, we're going to go all the way down here, add some bass. So let's just put that at 12 o'clock. And then we're going to go find in the highs. There, scoop that. Because we've scooped a lot of the mids and boosted the volume, the highs naturally go up as well. So let's go back to our thing. So maybe we want to go to the neck pickup, and now we want this kind of real bassy but scooped thing. go back to the bridge and compare the two. Now my bass tone sounds really, really thin compared to it because I boosted so much bass and we've got used to listening to it. So that is what we did with the clean sound. I'm just want to try a different thing, which is basically boosted mids. Now this doesn't necessarily sound as good with the clean sound, but it could be something you want to go for. So say you want, what we might do is take a little of that treble out that we didn't like, a bit of this high mid treble. And then crank the mids. So now we have more of a kind of dirty combo kind of thing, and then we could obviously boost this into the amp, but let's make it a little bit more subtle. Now this might be something more useful if you have a really scooped amp like a Fender and you can't get the mids you want. But this is where it gets really fun, and that's using distortion. So I did want to show the two things, the graphic as well. Now this is a very cheap graphic. If you can't tell, the LED doesn't work. So I can't tell if it's on or off without just clicking through it. So I'll just put in the video when we're turning it on. So I want to do a similar thing with distortion here. We'll do it on this just so I can show you how a graphic EQ works. Now we've got the Mark IV here, which I really, really like. It's really, really cool, but it doesn't have any EQ controls. And it has the typical Boogie Mark IV mid-range, which is hell a lot of 700 and 800. And with my amp, it's just too much mid-range, no low-end thump. Now it's good for certain maybe fluidy solo stuff, but it doesn't get as heavy and aggressive as I want it to. So what we're gonna do is use this EQ to do that. So, again at clean tone. Let's go nearly all the gain. Okay, sounds fine. I might just bring a little bit of gain 1 down. Sounds fine, but you can hear it's a little thin, it's a little mid-rangey. So, what I want to do, we get this EQ, put it on. Find that frequency there, find those ones there. Let's bring them down, almost to nothing. Bring the 4K up to keep that aggression in there, and then boost up some low end, and we're a bit closer to thrash that. Let's change these gains around. Now this isn't the best EQ in the world. It really doesn't do a lot until you get to the end, and then it seems to be a 10 dB boost, so it's a bit harder to dial in. You've got something like a Boss G7 or an MXR EQ or some of the higher end EQs, they do work a lot better for this purpose, but I had this lying around. I don't usually use it on my pedal board. I prefer the parametric style, but it's here, so I need to show what a graphic does. But the concept's going to be the same. So this is probably overly scooped. You might not want to use this in recording, but if you want, you know, Pantera and Metallica, you kind of need scoops. Not that you play it on telly, but anyway. So comparatively, there was a bit of volume changes as you're boosting and such, but yeah, you get the point. You can really sculpt that. So one other thing I wanted to do is the best kind of use of an EQ if you like all your tone. Like, you don't want to sculpt your tone really, but you want it for, you know, some part of the sound. Like, you're happy with your gain sounds, you're happy with everything, but maybe you want to do a solo and you want to boost out the solo. Now you can add more gain, but that might get more mushy. And you can, you know, just boost up the volume for the solo, but, you know, in a band context, ladder isn't always what works. And that is the typical mid boost. So what we're going to do here, we'll use this, mids and volume. So I'm going to add a little bit here and add a little bit here, and this kind of low end. So with the clean tone, we'll show you what it does, because you'll be able to hear it really easily. So let's just do a little bit of lead. So it's a volume boost, and it's boosting the mids in two kind of areas I really like to boost the mids. These are actually things I like to do in recording as well. But let's go put on the Kamisi. So let's say we're doing some rhythm, and you want a solo boost. So So this is where you're coming up into your solo, you put it on. Without it, you're going to get lost with the rhythm guitars, you're going to get lost with volume, you're going to get lost in the cymbals, which works for rhythm guitars because you don't want them in your face, you want the vocals in your face. But for the solo, again, So that is, your other usage is the mid boost and the solo boost, and that's probably the one that might resonate best with you because that might work best for what you're trying to do. And so the last thing is using it before distortion, which we did in the opening clip. And like I said, this really changes how the distortion sounds. So we're going to put the Kamisi back on and show how we can change the type of distortion it is. So again, here it is, just on. So it's fairly tight, kind of modern distortion. Now you boost that bass up, it gets real fuzzy and doesn't sound anything like it used to. You maybe boost some mids up, lower mids, add some of the actual mids, bring this down a little bit, and you have that cocktail sound. Don't know why I'm playing it either. A lot of famous tones were gotten using this method, either using a wah or using some other kind of pedal to boost into the distortion sound to get this very kind of fluid, kind of nasal, but in a good way, tone. You really hear it, especially in 70s classic rock. And similar to what a treble booster did, which we can try what a treble booster does. It does it, but it's a bit of a shift of frequency. So if we do this, go up here, turn that all the way up. So. Stock tone. So that is basically emulating a treble booster. Now a treble booster added its own harmonics as well, and it didn't just boost treble. That's a myth. It's more like a mid booster with some own harmonics going on. And lastly, what I did at the beginning, which is basically turning this Tele into a bit of a fatter single coil kind of tone. So fatter P90 / humbucker tone from a single coil is what I meant to say. I can't speak today. So this is our bass tone. A little bit thin, a little bit lacking in power as well. That's a lot thicker, a lot more like a humbucker. Maybe we'll up the mids a bit more. Get us into more kind of modern humbucker territory, and that's because modern humbuckers are so overwound that the mids basically dominate. Now with distortion. gnarly. So I hope you got a bit out of this video. That was a look at using an EQ pedal. Like I said, there is many different types of EQ. The main two for guitar is graphic and parametric. Now, for a lot of the beginners out there, a graphic might be easier to get your head around because there is set frequencies and you can kind of understand them if you've come from the treble, middle, bass kind of knowledge of EQ, and that's the only knowledge you have, which is fine. You know, most people don't need to dive right into how an EQ works. Then a 5-band graphic or 7-band graphic is probably your starting point to really hear what it sounds like. Now, if you really want to sculpt and you really want to get into it, a parametric EQ is a lot more powerful. Now, like this is a 2-stroke, is only 2 bands, which is a bit frustrating, but there's some more expensive ones on the market, like the Wampler one, for example, which is insane. Now that has multiple bands, it lets you change the Q, and for basically simple terms, we won't go through it too much, but Q is how wide of those frequencies. So say you wanted 1K, it's how far either side does that boost or cut go. Huge Q would mean nearly all frequencies, narrow Q would mean basically anything around 1K, 1.1K, maybe 0.9K, that kind of thing. So that is very, very powerful and your kind of advanced use, but it can be a bit overwhelming for a lot of people. So thanks for watching. Hope you got something out of it. Like I said, go check out EQ pedals, and I'll see you next time.